as you can see, we have a little agenda. If you follow along, I'll introduce everyone. But before we start, I just want to say that I'm happy we're all here. My name is Keith Bell. I'm from the 2nd Congressional District of Illinois. I've been doing political work since I was 10 years old. I started out knocking doors and making phone calls when scripts were still on paper and you had to dial a home number. I started out working for Jim Thompson when he ran in the 70s. My dad was a big supporter, and I got to go to a couple events in Springfield and thought, this is the bee's knees, I want to do this. So from the time I was 10 till about 16, I did little odd jobs here and there because, you know, what are you going to give to a kid? I did a lot of just phone calls for local district races, some more work at the state level with my dad. Then I went off to school, and when I did, I kind of separated from my parents and realized I had values that were more akin to what the Democratic Party was offering than to what the Republican Party was offering. And so I made that switch, and the first person I worked for when I made that switch, I was the assistant student director of Wisconsin for Al Gore when he ran in 1988. That was a great job. We had a great team, and it was all about the environment, which was an important message that I think we still aren't getting. But enough about me. We're here to discuss a bunch of things today and work towards a better future for all of you. I also would like to let you know that Congresswoman Kelly, who is also the chair of the Democratic Party, sends her greetings, and she asked me to report back after this to let her know what we're talking about down here, because as chairperson of the party, she has decided that we will no longer allow a ballot slot to go empty. We need to have a Democratic person in every slot, regardless of what the community has. We know there are Democrats everywhere. Let's find them. Let's get them into positions where we can get good, progressive Democrats elected into seats that will make a difference for this area and for the entire state. And then hopefully we can go and spread from there. There is an organization that we're going to be starting up. It's going to be a statewide, it's called, excuse me, Dems on the Move. But if you're interested in that, talk to me later.
There you go.
There you go. I got allergies. We don't have a lot of this stuff anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
But to move forward, I would like to introduce Alan Axelrod. Alan is the co-chair of CUDSA. As a tenants' rights organizer, he helped amend the discriminatory housing ordinance for the first time in over 25 years, as well as repeal the discriminatory housing policy at the Champaign County Housing Authority thereafter. I'm going to let you guys read the rest. Yep. I think Alan would best describe who Alan is. So.
I think the most succinct way to put it is we have a lot of human rights that aren't established and guaranteed in policy, and I've just tried to organize with folks while trying to keep them as safe as possible for those things, the latest of which was the No Iron Shutoffs campaign, which the folks here know. I don't necessarily need to take a whole lot of time for that. I've not been an activist very long, maybe 4 years total. So it's not exactly like I have a very long pedigree or anything like that where we can show an established track record. There are just values that I believe should be affirmed that we're here today to work towards.
Okay, next is Joel Funk, who is unable to be here today because he decided to go down water slides instead.
Jessica can go ahead and read.
Yeah, why don't you continue? I'm losing my voice.
Okay. All right. I'm going to read for Joel Funk. He wasn't able to be here. He had surprise plans with the family. Everyone understands this. He is a Democratic Precinct Committee person serving the Freeburg Township Precinct 1. He was elected and now serves on the Muscutic Community Unit School District Board of Education. He went to college on an Army ROTC scholarship to the Citadel, South Carolina Military College. There he earned 2 Bachelor of Arts degrees in Political Science and Modern Languages, German. Upon graduating college in 2006, he earned a commission as a second lieutenant in the U.S. Army's aviation branch. After completing flight school, he was awarded the Army Aviator Badge and a qualification in the Chinook series of Army helicopters. He served in the 10th Mountain Division, 101st Airborne Division Air Assault, and the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment Airborne, and the 5th Special Forces Group Airborne. He deployed overseas 7 times in support of combat operations in Iraq, Afghanistan, and Syria, as well as joint combined exchange training with the Colombian military. He graduated from the Army's command as a General Officer Staff College and a K-State University in 2017 with a Master of Arts in Security Studies. His awards and decorations include the Senior Aviator Badge, Combat Action Badge, Air Medal, and Bronze Star. Joel separated from the U.S. Army in 2019 in the rank of Major to be closer to his family, assist with local family business, and to serve as a leader in the community. He is a member of multiple local and national veteran and community-based organizations, and as a farmer and entrepreneur, he is crafting a business around sustainable and regenerative agriculture. He also works at the Legacy Company, helping clients with retirement strategies and risk management. And he is in support of all that we are doing now.
Thanks. The next person is also not here, Dr. Pam Grunmeyer.
She's on her way.
She's on her way, so we'll loop her in when she gets here. But she's done a lot of work with, I'm sure all of you know, the single payer. And so we're hoping to hear from her today as well. But that leads us to my counterpart in protesting, Miss Jessica Monsignor.
Oh boy. Do I have to read all of it?
No,
okay.
That's what you want to give.
Oh, just say whatever you want
I
to
think
say.
everybody knows.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Basically served 8 years in the Navy. My husband retired after 21 years. I got to become interested in politics. I was always interested in foreign affairs and everything else, just growing up overseas. Had dreams and aspirations. But basically, in 2016, Trump got elected. I got out of my wheelchair and started protesting and being an activist, and I'm happy to say I got to participate in the Illinois Ham-Aids. I got to go up to Milwaukee and protest Abortion Action Front with Abortion Action Front against Operation Save America. I think that's probably my favorite. I was honored to be able to give a speech at the opening of the Planned Parenthood clinic in Fairview Heights. It's very near and dear to my heart. And I am just here. Hopefully we can make our community of organizers better. We deserve better, we are better, and we've had a toxic environment for too long, and people, and older people especially, like to sweep things under the rug or keep that blister from popping. We know each other. We need to work together. We've got serious shit going on, and not a lot of people think like we do, and I think we can lead the way. This is just the beginning, and I am so happy to be able to work with DSA all the way up to Champaign-Urbana, man. It's a big thing. So we're going to take over the state. When they say Dems, we're going to take those seats. That's what we're doing. So
one of the things that I've learned for the DSA folks is that just being labeled a Democrat anymore, you're automatically put into the socialist. So
might as well go for it.
And I think that it's important to work together because we're all trying to accomplish similar goals. And I think it's important to have people outside of the party, like you guys, who help push the direction. Even if it's like slating candidates, things like that, it's important because that's the only way that your communities will gain in the long run, is by having people that you can trust and know are good candidates.
And passion and commitment,
Yeah.
so that we can communicate better with each other, yeah.
The next person that's here is Melinda. She's one of the organizers who helped put it together as well.
Hi, I'm Melinda Hilker. I wrote up a bio, but I hate bios, honestly. I really do. I know everybody else did too. So I'll kind of just give you the Reader's Digest version. I'm actually a teacher. That's what I've been doing the past couple years. I'm a licensed paraprofessional, special education aide, and I'm actually going back to school right now to become a special education teacher. I decided that's what I was going to do for COVID. Can't work, I can't be with my students, so I'm going to make sure that I'm taking over those classrooms because it's a dire need. And really that education in general has been something that I've advocated for pretty much since my children have been born, because I had to be that voice for them, because they both had not only learning disabilities, but they also had medical complications during birth. So I had to really learn on the fly how to be that voice that my kids need. And so single payer has been a very important, and so insurance reform has been a very important thing to me. I've never been a part of a formal group. I'm one of those people, if you want to have me, I don't want to be a part of your group then. But I found camaraderie, and I found people that had voices that I wanted to keep hearing. And invoked something in me. And that's why we're here today. And that's why I'm here today, because I want to be the change, and I want us to be the change that all of us have within of us. Yeah, the rest of the stuff is kind of irrelevant. I'm just someone who I'm like, half my career is volunteerism, because that's who I am. I like being of service. And it looks like we have Dr. Pam here.
Hi. Is there food over there?
Huh?
Is there food over here?
There is plenty of victuals for you, yes.
Okay, because I haven't eaten since I left my house.
Okay, go ahead and feed yourself, and we'll go over.
We'll leave her last.
Yeah, we'll go ahead and leave her last.
Well,
I'll go ahead and
We'll
read.
come back because Tabitha's not here, right?
Tabitha's not. She probably will be here later,
Yeah.
but let's go ahead and read for her.
Okay. Tabitha was awarded the Heartland Hellbender Award in 2015 for her activism and community stewardship. Tabitha Tripp has been a fierce advocate for frontline and fence line communities facing multiple issues, injustice, and inequality since 2012. Experience with lobbying, organizational development, protest art, general paper wrenching, and a thorn in the side of corporation. Tripp works with Southern Illinois DSA, SAFE, and Railroad Workers United. And now, you know, if you guys want to introduce yourselves and let us know who everybody is and where you're
Want to go ahead and start over here with Bo?
with Bo.
Hello. It's an interesting group. I've enjoyed talking to all of you. I guess since we're doing resumes, I can share mine. Yeah. So I've been working in politics since my 20s, electoral politics specifically. Studied Georgetown University, economics, government policy, got 2 masters, public administration, sustainable development. U.S. Navy veteran, which was an interesting experience to say the least. Delta Leadership Institute fellow, amongst many other things. Last 3 years, I've been organizing with a group called Carbondale Spring, which takes a really interesting approach to like local municipal politics. At its core, it's a, I guess what is colloquially known a defund the police effort, but it's also based in like the redirection of municipal tax funds towards a more sustainable lifestyle at a grander scale, at least the scale of a city. These included things like care workers, we were talking about cahoots earlier, hope to establish a program in our area that does that work. Renewable energy work, worker-owned cooperative development is another thing we do. And I'm missing something. Oh, food autonomy. We also have a robust food autonomy group that does a combination of urban and rural agriculture with an idea that we can grow our own healthy food.
Matter of fact, the onions came from Washington Street Garden.
Really?
Yep.
Here?
Oh, wow.
So that's wonderful. That's great to hear. Yeah, you know, our situation down here is probably a lot different than everyone else's. You know, we're in deep red Trump country. Obviously, we live in a city that is a small and dwindling blue oasis in the middle of this world.
Bastion of blue, we call it.
Yeah, and that's a good thing. I think with new redistricting, it's become pretty clear that we're largely going to be abandoned by the Democratic Party. That there's been deals made down here, state directives, which has kept some Democratic ballot spots open, uncontested. It's a surrender of sorts. So what we organize around is a more libertarian approach to progressive politics, something that can potentially speak to a wide swath of people. And that's how we organize outside and inside of parties. And it's been an adventure. And thanks for listening.
Yeah, my name is Claire Kilman. I'm a proudly queer polyamorous woman who's living her best life down here in Carbondale, Illinois. I got into activism. My foray was sort of radical queer activism. I'm the board member for a nonprofit that basically seeks to end conversion therapy nationwide. It's headquartered out of LA. And also I've been organizing with Carbondale Springs for the past few years. And we're a rowdy little group down here. We cause a lot of trouble and raise a lot of ruckus. Basically, what we feel and what we've all affirmed a serious commitment to one another, is that we feel that the best way we can affect the sort of policies that we want is by looking at the ground beneath our feet and reaching out for the things that we can touch. There are things here locally that we can accomplish if we all band together that we simply can't at larger scales in the macro. The sorts of social programs that Carbondale Spring, presents as potential solutions to the clear economic, social, and environmental crises of our time are not like new things. They're just all being implemented innovatively at the same time within Carbondale Spring. And uniquely, what we're doing is advocating that they be explicitly municipally funded. That's constantly what we're seeking is full municipal funding of all of these initiatives because it's what we feel like we're worth. Unfortunately, as Bo said, Carbondale and the surrounding area has been abandoned in multiplicity over the years. We've consistently endured both abandonment on the part of the state and abandonment on the part of the federal government. In the best way, we're going to have to fend for ourselves. And I'm just entirely committed to realizing the best possible future worth living in for the place that I love.
You want to hop over to Eddie?
Hi everybody, my name is Eddie Pratt Jr. Though I don't really care for the politics around the terminology, I'm guessing I'm what you would call a grassroots activist. I am someone who's in close solidarity with Alan here as part of the No Amber Shut-Off campaign. I'm also the creator of the CU Human Rights Coalition. It's a political discourse space explicitly for the purpose of education, mobilization, and fostering of relationships between community orgs in the sense of world building and community defense. Me, I'm a speaker. I'm someone who advocates for the unhoused. I'm someone who's a heavy canvasser. I do that 2 or 3 times a week, 1 day a week. I do that explicitly with CUDSA, dropping lit for COVID vaccine clinics, domestic violence, and utility restoration. Otherwise, I am a ally to all things that equate to equity and justice for all people. I'm someone who is explicitly anti-racist and try to emulate that in every part of my life. I'm someone who doesn't come from any sort of privilege at all. Of the unprivileged, I am the unprivileged of those folks. And that is the perspective in which I tend to bring. And I'm just happy to be here and be in solidarity with you folks. And it's a great thing to have people around you that feel the same way, have been through some of the same struggles, and we can set the course right together. You know, solidarity is important, and without it, as someone who's only really been like overtly active in the last year and a half, like it's something that's just has sustained me, especially during the cold winter months. You know, so yeah, thanks for having me today.
I'm Elizabeth Malone, or Beth. I started Indivisible Carbondale back when Trump was elected, and did a lot with them. I think we were quite active then, and we did a lot of really good constituent work, trying to at least call attention to Mike Bost and some of the other people. But I was in law school, and when I was in law school, I started a pro bono transgender legal name change clinic.
I used that.
Did you?
Yes.
Awesome. I started that. And that, like, I was working with that through the end of when I was working with the school, but I made sure that we got approval to give pro bono credit and all kinds of stuff so that it's continuing on. It's really still a really strong thing, and that's something I'm very, very proud of. I also got arrested twice in D.C. protesting Kavanaugh, interrupting the Senate hearings. We lost that fight, but
It was worth it.
yeah, it was. That's my proud, you know. That's my thing that I'm like, oh yeah, I'm glad I did that. But and I may be going back in June because we're expecting a lot of decisions. But anyway,
This is June.
Center
well,
for
yeah,
Popular
June
Democracy
26th,
still?
I think, the end of June.
Is the Center for Popular Democracy?
Yeah, it's
still?
Center for Popular Democracy. I've done most of my recent activism has been through Center for Popular Democracy, and we do a lot of DC protests and things. So that's basically it. I absolutely support, you know, moving this whole our focus kind of over to the left as a party, because we have just been dragged so far
I agree.
that it's just insane. And I think that this, like the COVID stimulus checks and things like that, are making people think a little differently, hopefully, that, you know, maybe there are, you know, benefits to people having a living wage, or even being able to survive without working, you know, and doing activist type of stuff, or, you know, helping in the community. But anyway, hopefully this will be the first of many. So.
It will be.
My name's Pam Gronemeyer. I'm a physician, and I live in Glen Carbon in the metro east of St. Louis. So I've been an activist probably since about 2004, when we, with the whole disaster about invading Afghanistan and all. I mean, the whole thing about bombing Iraq and everything. So I started a group. We were first called Downstate Democrats, and then we became Southern Illinois Democrats. Some Southern Illinois People for Change, or for Progress. I can't even remember what I'm not. It was a long ride. So I also am part of PDA. I'm the co-chair of PDA Illinois, and since I'm a physician, well, my real goal is single payer. I really work for Medicare for All. Not that I don't work, and I also part for a Move to Amend. For Move to Amend in 2014, we got on the ballot in Edwardsville Township, which is Glen Carbon, Edwardsville, which is probably now about 40,000 people. We passed a non-binding statement that corporations aren't people and money isn't speech by 76%. Okay, so we did that. And then I've been working on single payer for quite a while, because I'm also part of PNHP, Physicians for National Health Program, and I'm the Southern president. They divided the state into two. They have this really big thing about Chicago dividing the state into two, thinking that I think we're backward, or so, I don't know. But we don't have a whole lot of people south of I-80 and PNHP. So I was also part of a group called the Illinois Single Payer Coalition. I was actually there at the very beginning of it, and I was the vice president since it started until recently. So I was a Bernie delegate in 2016, and I was on the platform committee. In 2020, I was the Bernie delegate. And I mean, I've done marches, I've done rallies, you know, I'm all of them, you know, like you guys are from Carbondale, so we know what's happened to all of us in Southern Illinois. We have the combination of 3 hideous Republican Congress people. I mean, Shimkus got beaten by the, I mean, not beaten, Shimkus retired. I was in Shimkus's district initially. Then they carved me out, and they put us with we're in a thing that runs through the Metro East. I'm in the 13th. We went through Metro East, up through Springfield, and then we pick up Champaign-Urbana. So when that started, they created that hopefully as a swing district, but the person who ran as a Republican was worked for Shimkus, Rodney Davis, and he ran against David Gill, and David Gill only lost by 900 votes in the first election. But after that, we haven't been able to turn it. And I've seen, you know, I know you guys turned in the 12th to Mr. Bost. And then, I mean, Shimkus was out of it, but this Mary Miller is even further out of it. So, I mean, we have a lot of going to do to try to get something back to. And I mean, even in my county, Madison County, I'm in Madison, and you know, Metro East is made up of Madison and St. Clair, between which they have about 600,000 people. So, I mean, we really are probably the largest metropolitan area in Illinois, second to Chicago, even though they don't understand and still think that I'm in East St. Louis, so the people in Chicago. But, I mean, you know, we have a lot of work to do because Madison County, when I moved there, I mean, had a lot of Democratic people. Now we're down to hardly anybody. You know, the chairman of the board of Madison County is a Republican. I mean, we have the coroner, and we have the, I think we have the county clerk, and that's about it. We've lost everybody else. And the county board is now Republican. St. Clair is a little bit better. So, I mean, I think we have a lot of action to do. And, I mean, I think the goal is we should be working together. I mean, I've joined with the, I joined a group called One Payer State, which is a group out of, well, it's run by the guy from Philadelphia, or from Pennsylvania, Chuck Panaccio. And it's a group that's trying to work. You know, we all want single payer for all in the state, federally, but if we can't, I mean, in order to get it federally, we're going to have to really flip our Senate to do it. So right now, a lot of states are working on single payer, and there's a bill coming out next week by Ro Khanna in California that will loosen up the ERISA requirements and will also let funds be available to states for Medicare and Medicaid. So, I'm one part of One Payer States, and I also, through One Payer States, I linked up with the League because the League of Women Voters does have a group of women that are committed to single payer. So I'm trying to network out to find out who we can have because we have PDA, and the other thing we're working on is I believe that if we're going to have, I think it's good we have to educate people, but I think the idea of having resolutions in townships, in towns, and villages where where you go to the county boards and get them to endorse single payer for all, or you go get it on the ballot somehow so that it can be a non-binding referendum, because they've done it in many cities. They've done it in New Orleans, they've done it in St. Petersburg. I mean, they're working on it all over. They're working on it in Connecticut. I mean, then we can turn around and tell our senators, because when we were working with the Illinois Single Payer Coalition, I got a letter from Durbin saying that he doesn't dislike single payer, but he wants to hear people say they want to give up their employer insurance. So, I mean, where he's going to be stuck on that, you know, because I've known Durbin for a long time, because I've lobbied up in Washington. So, I mean, I think I think the biggest goal of us together is that we should all work together, and we shouldn't try to knife anybody in the back or have any power struggles, because, I mean, you know, we're not going to, you know, the biggest way the Republicans will win is to divide us. So we have to all be joined together. And that's all I'm saying. And you got my bio.
Okay.
I think we are at Sheila.
Yeah.
Or
Sheila has just asked me to introduce her.
okay.
This is Sheila Sheffer.
Keep it short.
This is Sheila Sheffer.
Thank you. when it was in the 1960s, I was too busy having babies and being a submissive wife and doing all the God things. And I didn't know about Vietnam. I didn't know about activism until 16. Is that when our last time? Seems so long ago. And then at my age, figuring it out. Duh. So now I'm an activist.
And she's an awesome activist.
Sheila shows up.
Yeah, she does.
Yeah, not always. I do what I can, just like everybody else.
Last but not least,
There's Sabrina.
Sabrina's here. Yeah.
Is that okay?
I'm Sabrina Hardenberg. I've been a part of progressive issues, whether because of work or volunteer activities in the community. So I've kind of lived my life backwards. I started out as a college professor working in international health and development and conservation sectors over several decades ago, and I was a college teacher. And then I moved back to my hometown where you basically had to reconsider everything you were looking out at for people's concerns in this international context, more in your own backyard. And so here I've held health law, healthcare quality improvement jobs, and then a lot of volunteer work while doing elder care for my mother. And so some of it has been with several different environmental groups, a couple political campaigns, and the basic theme throughout the past 40 years is, you know, I do stand for things that allow good quality health and health care for people, whether it's straightening out environmental health problems or dealing with access to health care, food security issues, and so on. Public education needs to be supported at all different age levels, and then, of course, you know, I'm into things that are a factor in climate change and environmental health issues, and so a number of people here maybe know me because we've all been trying to deal with the extractive industries messing up our nice places around here in southern Illinois, of which Giant City Park here is basically my backyard. I can literally jog from my front door on the other side of the park down to here and back home again if I care to.
Thanks. You.
Would you like to say?
Sure. I'm Ron. I'm a loser who makes videos on YouTube. There we go.
Well, that's everything. Thank you all for joining. I think you guys are setting out to do something down here that more people in the party and wherever you want that message to go, I think they need to hear this. And I think it's important that what we talk about here today gets back. And that's why I'm here. I want you guys to know that I am an ally for this region. I live in the south suburbs of Chicago, but this trip to me is, I love coming down here because the people that I meet down here are really blue people. And when in the north, sometimes it gets a little jaded and, you know, we don't even think about it because I know my district is always going to be blue. It's just the way it is, you know, because the community that I live in, it's just always been Democrats. Republicans don't live there. So it's a poor community. They don't want to be there. So I'm excited to be here this weekend, or today, and to meet a lot of you because I think it's important that your messages get back to the people that need to know, and I want you all to know that I will, whatever you want me, whenever you need me, I will make sure you all have my email address. It's kabell68@gmail.com. if you need anything or there's something that you want people to know up north, just let me know. I want to be an asset to you as well. I think that it's important for the reason that I come down here, and I'll explain. When I worked for Bernie, my job specifically was to go into red areas and find the pockets of blue and to build them. That was what I did. So I worked in 7 states doing that for Bernie. And I learned that just because this region is red doesn't mean it can't be blue if we put the work into it. And I'm not talking about you because you guys have been. I'm talking about the people that control the purse strings, the people that should understand the needs of the community. And like you're saying, some of the people that are in the power positions anymore, it's hard to tell who they are and what's going on, and you've had issues. And I think this is great that you guys are coming together and organizing as a unit. I think it's important to try to work through the issues that you've had in the past and move forward in a positive direction. And I'm glad I could be here. So I think we're up for a break. So, how long do you want to break for?
Specifically, I learned that this was the Extreme Energy Extraction Summits, which was a gathering of grassroots organizers from all across the continent, mostly from the U.S., but there were a couple times we had folks from Canada. And we started with the HEMES principles. And although the HEMES principles have been around a long time, I don't know if y'all are familiar with them, but the HEMES principles came about from grassroots organizers that kept having to deal with large green groups, large NGOs, that kept running over them and speaking for them. And does this sound familiar? Sierra Club, NRDC, LPC. So we got plenty of those that this really resonated with me, and it's been something that I've been trying to bring to the groups, because what it does is it brings the conversation back to a grassroots level. It brings it back to the people who are most impacted by the decisions that people are making about where they live. And so you can read more details about this, but it came from the HEMES gathering in 1996. 40 people of color, European, African, American representatives, and I understand there was a large contingents of Native American folks. So when they created these principles, they go in detail online, please look them up, but they are as follows. Be inclusive as you can be. Everybody's got a story. Let them tell their story. So we emphasize bottom-up organizing. It doesn't mean it comes from top down. We go bottom up, which is like, this is all what we've been talking about here today. Let people speak for themselves. There's nothing more aggravating than somebody speaking for you and telling your story wrong, right? So let people speak for themselves. And if that person's not here, ask permission to tell their story. I want to tell Barney's story real quick. Work together in solidarity and mutuality. You want to build just relationships among ourselves. That's what we're here for today. And I think that this is the most important one, is the commitment to self-transformation. I don't know how many times I've walked into a space and somebody's preaching to me what I should be doing, but they ain't not walking the talk, right? So you have to walk the talk of what you're doing in organizing, or it doesn't mean a hill of beans, right? You really need to think that one through. And if you're not willing to make that commitment to self-transformation, then what are you doing? So ask yourself these really real questions. Like, make them like part of who you are as an organizer, and I promise you, your organizing will change. So are we all, I don't want to tell you what to do. I would hope that as a group we all agree that this is a good way to build a foundation with what we're moving forward with.
I second that.
Yep.
Agree. Agreed.
All in favor?
Aye.
Not that we're going to say, okay, cool.
No, I don't want to transform myself.
Well, it's a very real thing,
No,
because
absolutely.
we adopted these. No, I'm going to tell you a story about that. The reason that we're here is because of one person in particular. And we held a mirror up to this person and said, you've made a commitment to self-transformation. You've agreed by the HEMES principles. So let's talk about some of your actions. and that person refused to look at their actions. And at that point, the conversation is pretty much over because they have shown you that they don't have ethics and integrity to carry forth into the conversation. So, and don't be afraid to use that. If you've made an agreement with somebody to work in this way, don't be afraid to sit down with them like, let's go over this again. We made this agreement on this date that we were going to use this as our foundational operating principles. And you're not abiding. Here's X, Y, and Z where you haven't abided by them. Show it. Like, it's okay. That's how we pull each other in. That's how we try to hold each other accountable. So with that, do we want to set up the defining the norms of the space?
I think that's the next. Yeah.
Is that this is the place to do it?
Yep.
So have you all been part of spaces where there's a big whiteboard up, and if somebody wants to take notes, that would be great, where somebody says, these are the ground rules for this space, these are the norms that we want to see in this space. And for starters, it usually comes, don't yuck my yum.
Yep.
Yep. Don't yuck my yum. That's a good one.
Yeah.
Another one's like, speak up, step back.
Step back. Yeah.
Right? So if somebody hasn't been talking a whole lot, maybe it's time for you to move back and let somebody else who's more quiet step up. I'm usually a quiet one in this space. I know you probably don't believe that, but I will step back until somebody pulls me forward. What are some other ones that you all like to hear in group norm settings?
So holding space.
Holding space, yep.
Yeah.
One person, one mic, one voice? What else? Other ideas?
Are there things that you guys have encountered or that your organization does?
We had talked about introducing staff to where it's not just about holding space, but it's also allowing for someone to take a board, and if you do want to follow that person, you simply raise your hand, and that way it doesn't interrupt the flow of the conversation.
Yeah, I guess that's what parking lot.
Parking lot, bike. Well, parking lot, stack is when you want to speak, but parking lot is another idea that doesn't fit into this category.
Okay.
Or a bike rack is
Okay.
the other hipster term to use.
Or this.
Well, and there's also jargon.
Yeah.
Thank you for doing that. Jargon's
Oh
a big
yeah,
one.
the elephant or
Giraffe.
yeah, giraffe. Yeah.
Jargon giraffe.
Jargon giraffe. I've not seen that. We always just, we do the fishing hook because you got to pull it in. You got to pull in all the information. Another one is, one person, one mic. Let's see. If you're not the person who experienced that, make sure that you either have permission to tell the story, so it's your story.
Yeah. Yeah, the eyes. Don't ever start with you. Begin with the eyes. And
Right.
Yeah, you're speaking for yourself, not
Right.
for yeah.
Yeah. Does anybody else have? I mean, we can add to this. I think this is just a good list to get started, that when you get into the group settings, and this may not be this group in particular, but with new groups, you kind of set up your group norms so that you're all on the same page when you're having conversations. I mean, what?
One is mistakes will be made, nobody is perfect, from the idea that if you violate a norm or something like that, it's not exactly like you're excommunicated. It's going to be something that people talk to you about.
Great.
The other thing is, there is never a question that shouldn't be asked. If you need information, ask it.
We can always go in the parking lot.
So no stupid questions.
Or table it or whatever for now. Yeah.
Yep.
No, Common Defense does stack too, so. It's progressive veterans that they were working, now they're concentrating, they're doing the demand democracy with the House bill and S1. But they were pushing for they're also pushing for the AUMFs, which is authorization for use of military force. And it's basically progressive veterans around the country. They're actually fighting for working class stuff, and right now they're concentrating in West Virginia and Arizona. So There's like 60 people across the country. It's not big.
If later you find you
Progressive
want to
and
add a
military.
norm, just let us know that you want to add a norm to this. It pops in your head later. I think Melinda's taking notes on
I think
that.
I missed something though. Hold on.
Yeah, I didn't realize. I keep forgetting. There's still progressives in the military. They're just a smaller bunch.
And they're in the closet a lot of
So,
times.
let's do a quick review. No yuck my yums. One mic, one voice, which is holding space. Stack or bicycle rack?
Stack is, if you want to talk, get on stack. And bicycle rack is for another idea. Usually that's written to the side.
Yeah, bicycle racks like parking lot.
It's tangential information, or places that you can continue off into with a.
So do we want to lump that together into, or have them be individually separated?
I think that they're different ideas, so I think they should be separate. I don't want to direct you guys. I'm just.
No, you're facilitating. You're supposed to.
Right, you're doing exactly what you're supposed to. Okay, so don't yuck my yums. One mic, one voice. Parking lot, stack, bicycle rack, speak with the eyes. I statements. There's no stupid questions. I missed something.
I think that was it.
That sounded like it.
That sounds.
I'm
If
worried.
you missed it, we all did too, so.
Oh, okay, good, right.
Coming back.
It's not a thing anymore.
And can I just take a few moments to relay to you my conversation with Barney this morning? Barney regrets that he wasn't able to come because not only does he have vehicle troubles, he's really having a lot of physical troubles. And this would have been just too much of a haul for him. And so he sends his regrets. He really did want to be here today. What he has gone through has definitely impacted him for the long haul. I wrote about it in my statement, but very quickly that his bank account was kind of taken over by this person, and by losing that bank account, payments were missed on the house that he was actually able to make money with through Airbnb, and basically they ended up losing the house that they had been paying per month, rent to own kind of thing. So he wasn't able to purchase that house. They lost the house, then the land, which was adjacent to his property. And that was his sole income for the Vineyard Indian settlement. The other thing that had happened that was, I think, important to note is that in the process of cleaning out some of the spaces, artwork was taken from his home. And that artwork was taken supposedly to a safe climate area because it's indigenous artwork that Barney has collected, because Barney would go to reservations and he would teach English and he would, help kids basically who were troubled, and he ended up with a lot of pretty cool artwork from some now well-known artists. And he didn't get his art back until he actually talked to the ex-state's attorney, and I may be wrong, maybe the present state's attorney, I'm not totally sure about that, but that the sheriff's department had to come and threaten a Class A felony because the artwork was more than $25,000. The other thing that Barney went through, and I don't know if you all know about this, but Barney tried to get recognition through the state of Illinois, state recognition for the Shawnee peoples of Vineyard Indian settlement. And they did get a bill passed, and they had a lobbyist for a little while, and they got it through the House and they got it through the Senate, but for whatever reason, it got sent back to the House with an amendment. And after the amendment was presented, you right?
Yeah.
Spidey bug.
And so
They don't hurt you.
the amendment caused the bill.
Don't mess around
So what happened was this amendment
you,
caused the bill to go back where bills go to die.
Yeah.
It didn't come back out. And so that has also hurt Barney and the Vineyards Indian Settlement in a way that they haven't been able to even get a legislator's ear since that happened. We had one meeting with Senator Fowler, and Senator Fowler said, well, unless you decide to take a blood test, then this is even not a starting conversation. So come back to me with a blood test. And that's not exactly accurate information. So Barney's humbly requesting that if anybody in this group would know how to get the bill that passed without the amendment back out of the bill dungeon and bring it back to the governor, all he has to do is sign it, is what Barney's thinking. I don't know, because I've got contradictory evidence about that, but that is Barney's request. He feels that if he could get state recognition, he doesn't want federal recognition, if he could get state recognition for the Vineyard Indian settlement, that they would then be able to apply for more not-for-profit loans. But as it stands right now, they're kind of unable to do anything else because of basically the only people that were working for him kind of, I don't know, ruined the reputation, ruined the chances. I don't really know all the backstory except that Barney would just like to be recognized as the remaining Shawnee descendants that are left in Illinois. And that was his ask. And he also said that if you're vaccinated, he would gladly like to have visitors over in Harrod, Illinois. And if you don't know where he lives, we can get you in contact, and he'd love to sit. I think he still makes fry bread. He doesn't cook it. He'll probably pull it out and throw it in the pan, but you'd have to cook the fry bread. So. Anybody have questions about Barney? And he did ask me to share that with you, so.
I lost my script. You took it.
I lost my script.
I think we're gonna, does anybody have anything else any other norms that they'd like to set? Then I think we're moving on to Alan's presentation.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna hand these out real quick.
Thank you,
Linda. So what follows is one of the first presentations that I gave to the Champaign-Urbana DSA. I'm just going to go over here. And this is because things that would otherwise in other less informed spaces be considered as petty actually can pose safety risks, especially to folks with variants of PTSD or similar traumas. And I wanted to make sure that the membership understood the basic language of abuse so that they'd be able to give voice to their experiences more precisely, and also so that they understood the need for what we have in the DSA, which is something called a harassment grievance officer. By no means a perfect mechanism, and it's going through revisions, but the basic premise of it is that regardless of where you are in the DSA strata, if a DSA member files a grievance against you, there will be an accountability and fact-finding process to just make sure that those members are heard, at the very least. So to go forward, there's also a really important content warning, and I had given this originally over Zoom because it was pre-vaccination. So some of the things that we might discuss might be things you've done, might be things that bring up uncomfortable memories. This is not meant to be a judgment for those actions, but to help you understand those interactions and to also help to basically prevent those kinds of dynamics from coming up again. So that's why that little disclaimer is there. And we don't necessarily have to go through the entirety of the presentation depending on time. However, there's quite a lot of different reasons to care about dynamics of domestic violence, and this was information that I had lifted from a domestic violence survivor support service in Champaign-Urbana called Courage Connection. We distribute their literature every Thursday at 6:30 p.m. alongside other community literature because it's that important. We have folks who are literally trapped into unsafe living conditions. So reasons for activists to understand this rather than strictly service providers is because mandatory reporting requirements are not necessarily safe. And if people know that they can reach out to you about their experiences, they might have some level of advocacy that they are willing to engage in rather than none at all. The other organizational reason is because it's not like people haven't been organizing for the past 50, 60, 100 years. And it's not exactly the federal government's fault that each one of those organizing efforts floundered, failed, or split. Just because somebody has a healthy ideology or somebody is espousing for progressive practices does not mean that they will be willing to surrender control in political dynamics. And abuse is fundamentally about control. So, and lastly, for coalition purposes, one of the reasons that we are here is we have a limited ability to actually take action when abuse is identified. If someone was in Indivisible and was held accountable and leaves, and was held accountable by the DSA and leaves, there is zero meaningful recourse to protect those members from continued harm. And so that's one of the reasons why when we had talked about what we would do here, Progressive Accords is one of those things that came up as a potential route. Now, on the why this is important slide, I've since learned, of course, that not everybody agrees with the circumstances as portrayed, which is a very common situation when there are abusive dynamics. Paula Jean Swearingen is one person who is alleging abuse in the brand new Congress organization. I've talked with other DSA people who disagree. Later in the presentation, and in fact the very last slide, we talk about personal best practices, at least that I've kind of come to, that kind of provide some rule of thumb or guidance as to how to handle those situations without necessarily causing further harm to the people involved. Because it can be very frustrating to understand. Nobody may actually know the full facts of what happened, especially if people's traumas result in them maintaining a protective boundary. So the first thing is that there are some definitions that were contained in the Courage Connection pamphlets that are really important to make sure that we have an agreed upon set of definitions. One is domestic violence, because so many people strictly limit it to physical violence in discourse to either avoid accountability or diminish the experiences of others. It's important to actually recognize that this social service agency had as their definition a pattern of behavior that includes physical violence, sexual violence, threats, and emotional and psychological abuse. And I think those last three are particularly identifiable among the people here. Gaslighting is also particularly important to understand because so many people think that it's like this very extravagant act. It can be very subtle. So it is withholding factual information or providing false information to the victim, having the gradual effect of making them anxious, confused, and less able to trust their own memory and perception. That is something that I have personally experienced ad nauseum related to the person that ironically brought us all together. And lastly, they have the definition of trauma-informed care. This is a structure for understanding, recognizing, and responding to the effects of all trauma. And one of the most important things to understand, victimized responses do not necessarily look noble. And so one of the things that's really important for trauma-informed organizing is to provide and accept that sometimes people are going to be acting in ways that are harmful to themselves and others, not because they want control, but because they were harmed and don't necessarily have the framework to take a step back, process independently to keep themselves safe. This is something that I've seen a lot over the last 2 years. The simplest model for understanding how this sort of thing happens is the three-phase model for the cycle of violence. And for myself, a rule of thumb is if you think that you've been through this cycle, you'll know for sure when it happens the second time. Is that there, and this goes into some of the properties of it. I'm not necessarily going to read every single slide, but this one I think is just important to go through. In the tension building phase, the perpetrator, that is the person who's doing the harm, has increased tension. They are on the verge of losing their sense of control. the victim withdraws or feels like they are walking on eggshells. They aren't allowed to express themselves in certain spaces for fear of retaliation. The perpetrator then acts to increase control. The abusive incident usually happens when that assertion of control fails. They reassert control, often by taking in organizing jargon, we'd call it a shortcut, but basically infringing on somebody's human rights or wellness immediately. The victim is traumatized, and most importantly, the perpetrator blames the victim. And so, for understanding that, when somebody's trying to establish a narrative around abuse, which is obviously, again, we are here because of that, it's important to listen and to not come to an immediate judgment, because the thing is that the easiest lie to tell is when it's 4 parts truth, 1 part lie, right? And when we get to the factor of gaslighting, where it's the systemic provision of false or misleading information, that's usually a demonstration that somebody has a mastery of that basic implementation. So it will take time to understand that. Just to go to a mathematical concept, it's called cross-entropy. It is the additional information and communication required in order to understand a concept once a false concept has been embedded. After that happens, of course, there's the honeymoon phase. The perpetrator is apologetic. The victim feels guilty or responsible. The perpetrator promises change. And the victim will more than likely tend towards reconciliation and to diminish their own experiences, the abuse that they have suffered, as an effort to try and move past that. So there's additional information in here where we go into the 6-phase model. I'm not going to go through that. You have this for reference. Over the last 2 years, I've literally sent photos to folks where I just pointed at a specific thing to try and explain to them what was happening without like going into it and without saying like, this is just my opinion. This is from a manual. But the most important thing that I think we can go over that is here is when it gets to the emotional manipulation. I believe I put that in the slide. Tactics that abusers use to avoid accountability. That's the section. So let's see if this sounds familiar. Under putting others on the defensive, we have attacking their competency, attacking them personally, attacking the competency of those in authority, bringing up relevant issues, letting others do all the work, using or enforcing silence, minimizing the situation, demonstrating anger, picking at details and ignoring the actual issue, paying little to no attention.
Hours on end.
Under controlling information, agreeing with no intention of following through. This is very important when we get to that whole honeymoon phase of promising change. Saying whatever will satisfy or please at the moment to end the discussion. Leaving information out, distorting information, mentioning self-serving information only. Being intentionally vague. Confusing others by including too much detail or not enough. Refusing to give any information. And controlling interactions. This is one of the, this is when you really should have the red flag on, right? Listening selectively and hearing only what is self-serving. Diverting attention to minor points. And this is gendered language from from Courage Connection. They do this deliberately. Insisting he forgot, didn't hear, or wasn't told. Focusing on being misunderstood as opposed to addressing the issue. Shifting blame to others or other circumstances. So, and this goes on and on and on. I'm going to skip over to the emotional manipulator tactics, just to read those out to you. Constant victimization, one-upmanship, powerful dependence, Triangulation, that is when I'll tell, for example, Ron one thing and Eddie another to cause conflict. Blasting, which, again, I will say, for example, because it's also really important to distinguish, there are organizing tactics that can look very similar to abuse, which makes it hard to understand. It's important to understand that abuse is more often than not done undemocratically. And so if you're trying to understand what's happening, see if somebody voted for it. Because an example that I had recently was last Monday, for example, a public official tried to say that lift the ban on rent control was just a Chicago issue. I didn't defame her. I posted a news article where she was quoted as saying, without lifting the ban on rent control, we can't fight rent increases, and she had signed an open letter for lift the ban on rent control. Is that blasting?
No.
It would be if I were doing that without helping an organizational interest. It would be if I was trying to attack a person and say, this is why you can't trust a word that she says. Instead, we were tagging the city council persons who had just received that comment and letting them know, in the context of an open letter they were asked to sign, that the facts were different. So that can be construed as blasting. There is a discussion to be had there. I'm not saying that's blameless. That is something that I did recently. Another one is projection. This is when you basically say, Melinda's greedy. She's going to be taking over, right? Intentional misinterpretation. I tell you something about my experiences and you castigate that or otherwise project something else in there. But flirting and intimidation are also emotional manipulator tactics. There are, I've literally gone onto, among other things, Twitter, about the fact that some organizers are trained to manipulate instead of inspire. And so this is something that even people who aren't all about control, but are just trying to do well by an issue, may engage in. So where possible, that is something to have a conversation about. But I don't want to belabor this too much. I want to go into the basic crisis intervention. This is something that I've done a lot. And personal best practice, where it's the only slide where I have my personal opinions on here. Okay, and so that's the last of the last one. So we'll go through the basic crisis intervention since that's more authoritative. When you are encountering somebody in crisis, first off, this is somebody who feels like they're under attack, feels like they can't talk to anybody, might want to withdraw from everything. That's a gist of a crisis. So the first and most important thing is to understand what they need to feel safe. And that could be something that isn't necessarily directly applicable to the issue at hand. It could be just finding them an edible. It can be anything. Find out what the victim wants for you. Don't advocate for somebody in a way they don't want, right? Validate the victim's feelings. And this even goes into when somebody's in a traumatic response, when they are saying things that you do not want people to know they're saying outside of that room, that isn't necessarily because they are themselves abusive. There is no perfect victimized response. So it's more important to validate the victim's feelings while they are in crisis than it is to go, but actually. All right? Ensure the victim knows you care and are an ally. You aren't using them for gain. You aren't trying to exploit their experience. You are taking time to help a human being. Ensure the victim knows that they are not to blame. People, and this is something that has happened with a former roommate of mine, will talk about how they feel somehow they are a magnet for abuse. It is not their fault. Make sure that they know that. Ensure the victim knows they have the right to be safe. These things sound like common sense. The reason that these things are here is because some folks literally don't even think that. This is why people need therapy. This is why people go to crisis intervention services. Let the victim know their options. This could be immediate options. This could be a proactive crisis plan. This could be figuring out ways they can sustain their activism while maintaining boundaries. Inform the victim of actions you will take. Don't do something without their consent, right? Lastly, it's not easy. Remain calm as best as you can. Ensure the expectations are realistic. Don't say we're going to like burn the police station over this one particular issue, although I'm sure there's others where that might happen. Ask open-ended questions to avoid coercion. Do not suggest a route forward. The people-pleasing nature of some folks will cause them to want to conform to that, even if it's not safe for them, and they then, because you had suggested, lead you to believe that it is in fact safe for them, and then they lead to a later crisis. Keep your promises. Under promise, over deliver is a statement, one of the only statements my conservative dad has made that I agree with. It applies to crisis intervention. Make sure the victim remains in control. Just like abuse is about control, the victim has lost control over their basic safety, right? And take the time to explain things thoroughly. I may or may not have deliberately slowed my speech while going through that. So, personal best practices, because again, identifying the victim is hard, right? We're here because this has taken years.
I just want to add one thing
Yes.
I learned about myself is as a victim, we learn a tactic that's called fawning. And that's people pleasing in basic terms. And if you see somebody that's a people pleaser, I'm just saying that might actually throw up red flags for you that that person may have been the victim of something such as this, and that might be something that would clue you in. Fawning is the word.
Absolutely. Thank you. So, because identifying who the victim is in a situation can be really difficult, I put some personal best practices. This isn't authoritative, this is the slide with my opinion. So if you disagree with that, that is okay. But if you don't know who the victim is, and you can at least identify who the more oppressed party is, go there. Err on the side of protecting the more disenfranchised, if that is discernible. If it isn't, try to find somebody who's a mutual and agree to have an informatic barrier and try to provide support to both folks. It's more important to support the victim than it is to risk not supporting them, in my opinion. It does more long-term damage. You could accidentally, for a short time, support a perpetrator, and that will do far less harm than leaving a victim unsupported, in my opinion. And either way, be transparent, accessible, and if possible, engage in an accountable grievance process. And that's basically the gist of it. But I have the long form from Courage Connection that I literally have just a ton of scribbles. It's wrinkled, it's stained, and I take pictures of it all the time to send to folks when they run into these kinds of situations. So I hope that this is useful to you, at least as a starting reference, but there's no replacement for actually getting in touch with the local domestic violence support services and looping them in, getting them more connected to the community, because the challenge that we have, especially when we're trying to go for progressive policies, is that we need to make sure that progressive practices are upheld, and we need to make sure that this is part of it. So anyway, those are my, I don't know if that's not 2 cents, maybe that's my $1.50, but thank you very much for providing the space to go through this. Thank you to Melinda, Jessica, and so many others for helping to organize this. I'll take my seat.
Good job.
So, do we need to take a break?
Does anybody need a break?
Are we ready to move forward?
I think we can just keep moving.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Go.
the next step is we're going to talk about the group sharing and past trauma experiences. So things that you've experienced that you'd like to talk about. I believe, Melinda, you were going to handle this section, or are we just going to do it as a group?
Well, I wanted to present kind of what Alan and I had started.
Oh,
And
are you gonna stand up?
I don't know what's easier for everybody else.
What do you feel comfortable doing?
I don't know.
Yeah, this is.
I feel more comfortable
you-
standing because seriously, my back's killing me.
Okay, I will put the stand back up.
So,
I run to the bathroom and you continue.
All right, let's take a break first.
No, I'm fine.
break.
No, it's okay, it's okay.
We can take a quick 5.
Because we're going to take a break so you can go pee.
Yeah, it's fine.
Do a quick 5. Yeah, go.
Yeah.
Okay. Already kind of know that Alan and I started gathering a grievance process. We did it because we had we were in a group, Our Revolution, and we've been doing it together since the very beginning. We were on the first 3 people in the group. And as the group progressed, we started feeling and finding different things that made us all very uncomfortable. And it came to a head in January. And when it did, it happened so quickly. We kind of all spun out. But what we did get was actually permission from Georgia herself to start this process. So this literally is the testimonials of over 24 people with
Jesus Christ.
something of at least a dozen or more organizations. And that's just what we figured out. That's not including, we haven't reached out to all the different places because honestly, I'm pretty sure there's people down in Florida that have had this experience before us. For me, personally, I met Georgia in 2008. We started working together because we were the only progressives before the name progressive even happened in a small community, in a small Catholic school in West Frankfort. All of our kids, we saw the racism that was happening and we wanted to make a change. We saw that this town didn't even have recycling, for God's sakes. Like, who doesn't have recycling in 2008? So this is what we did. We put this together. A bunch of different groups at the time. And that's when I first initially met Georgia. I'm going to kind of open up the room for other people to speak about what they've experienced. We just talked about the trauma that can happen in organizational spaces. And I'm pretty sure from everybody's response, every single person here has experienced almost every single one of those from a common person who is literally, from 2008 on, destroyed every organization and every person she's literally worked closely with. Is there any survivors left? Probably, but those are just enablers at this point, and that's how I'm seeing it. Because I can't keep holding this. I'll be honest. I could only print out 5 copies of this because I listened to every single one of your voices. I heard every single one of your stories, and I made sure that I heard them. But it's heavy, and it's very heavy, and I'd like to pass this along to each of you to tell your stories. I'm going to start with Alan, who was beginning of this grievance process, and then I'd like to go to some of Tabitha and Jeannie, who's some of the oldest victims, really, of this entire thing.
So before what I'm about to read happened, there's something that I actually didn't put in writing that Georgia acknowledged when I was thrown out of Our Revolution without a vote, which is on November 14th, 2020, 4 days after we came out with a video that actually, happened the day before Commonwealth Edison stopped utility shutoffs, the week before Ameren, Illinois stopped utility shutoffs. I was threatened to take that down by Georgia in front of a witness. On January 24th, 2020, she acknowledged that after we held a vote, she was the only person who voted to have me leave the org, said there was no vote, and then threw me out. But before that, and one of the reasons that she had thrown me out was because I was engaged in a grievance process. On January 20th, 8:37 p.m., I had a voicemail, and it starts with this. "Hey Alan, I want you to take charge of this grievance. I know what it is, and you know, I think I have shared that story before." It goes on to name a person who isn't here, so I'm not going to read that part out. But what I had witnessed right before then, right before I had received this phone call, was Melinda had said she wanted to bring forth a grievance process. We had talked about this for weeks as a group, and somehow that bureaucracy just never happened. And Georgia started to berate Melinda into disclosing information. That is never what you do when somebody says they want to start with a grievance process. You aren't supposed to disclose in front of a group who the accused is. You aren't supposed to disclose to the accuser all the information. You're supposed to engage in a process with a trusted person who is deputized for that role. And that just wasn't something that happened. Some other things that had occurred with Georgia in our revolution is there'd be certain moments where she would accuse me of something that she had instructed me to do literally 5 minutes before. An example was as minor as creating a link for a Facebook event. She said, "By the way, I told Mike Rita, I told Mike you will be reaching out to mobilize the Champaign event." That was sent January 15th at 7:50 a.m. January 15th at 7:55 a.m., I sent a message to Mike saying, "I'll be in touch with the CU People's City Council event at lunch." So like this kind of stuff happened again and again and again, where, you know, at this point I started to build a little bit of a dossier, but I only left like core details in here. But one of the biggest red flags that was experienced that I also didn't write down, trying to say that this is a sacred space where our trust is sacred and therefore we should not bring up concerns, was literally something that had happened. My testimonial's written in here very poorly. I'm going to stand by how badly it is written because that was me writing things under duress. Our revolution, our Illinois revolution, from Mike Olez, the National Field Director, and Richard Rodriguez, the Treasurer and also the State Co-Chair, acknowledged the facts that were in these testimonials that I'm holding, not just mine. Who am I to pass off to next?
I think it would be Tabitha. Would be the next oldest story. Oh no, it would be Jeannie. Okay, I'll speak for Jeannie, if that's okay. That's okay. 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 So Jeannie Hernandez and Georgia and I, we all had, like I had spoke before, we actually had all started joining a group. So literally every day, hours on end, we were spending time together so we could create the type of school and the type of community that we wanted. And we did it. We did it very successfully until the end of the event. And then the money disappeared. The children's artwork disappeared. And I don't know how many other things disappeared. We kind of got to the point where we weren't even sure who to trust anymore. So we put it on to the administration. We're like, we don't know what to do. We can't get the artwork back. We don't know. What do you do, right? And from what we've heard is that because Georgia wasn't allowed to do this lovely 5-day long event to where it was introducing children, little white children of privilege, to some culture is the point. We gave them the 5 senses in 5 days from 5 different countries, and we ended with a beautiful art exhibit. And yet, it was destroyed by one person who literally sent a cease and desist letter to the school to say they couldn't do it without her. They weren't allowed to host an event for children, an educational event for children at a school because her name wasn't on it. So that's story one. So personally, Jeannie also, because we're friends, we're trying to take care of our friend. She just moved here from Florida. She lost her husband. We're empathetic human beings, and we helped her in any way we could, including redoing her house, because Rojo was lovely enough to use his skills as a contractor and helped her. What ended up happening is he didn't get paid. Then when he went to go retrieve equipment from the house, she actually called the cops on them, knowing that Rojo, Jeannie's husband, is seeking his citizenship still. He had just gotten his green card. Do you know what the stakes that she put at risk for that man over nothing? It wasn't her property, but she decided she's going to keep it and then blame them and call the cops. Now, mind you, this is in 2008. What we did, the school decided, well, she's just not allowed to hold money anymore, and she is not allowed to run any of the events. And then she hopped to the next group. Then she hopped to the community, it was the Catholic education groups. Then she was kicked out of that. She's not welcome at St. John's at any point anymore because of the damage she did to that community. And then we hopped to the next victims.
What happened?
We don't know. I mean, look, 2008, 2009 is when we had interactions. That's the time. I'm not going to go into the sensitiveness because it does involve minors. I'll just put it that way, that there was minor courts involved. And there was a lot of family stuff to where they're not here, and I don't think we should tell their story. But there is family history that was playing part in that time. So what she was doing between there, I think she was moving her way through St. John's Parish, and then she started working also with St. Francis?
The wineries.
Oh,
the
no.
The wineries, because we did what do you call it, fundraisers for that, and over there in Benton.
That's right. That's right. Actually, she had, we don't know the whole story. Supposedly, she owned a vineyard, a winery in Benton.
She was in cahoots with the guy there, supposedly.
No, this is a different one. This is in Benton, Illinois.
Yeah, this is Benton.
I haven't even investigated this one because actually I forgot about it until Jeannie just brought it up. Because
I just know because I was there. You know.
Right.
We questioned her about stuff, and we would get very vague details on what was going on, where the money was going, what the things were doing. But that was
right.
St. John's.
Okay, so yeah, so then she was partway trying to take over, run a winery, become a chef, something, but none of it actually had any credentials behind it, if that helps anybody understand. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to Tabitha, right?
Yeah, I'm just moving you a little bit out of frame.
Sit down.
So, I want to...
Actually, it'll be easier like this. There we go.
What I first want to offer up is an apology. And this is something that victims do, but I'm going to apologize anyway because I have been a bitch. I'm sorry. I'm sorry I was rude. I'm sorry I was cold. I'm talking to you specifically on that one. Because what happened to me, I didn't know who to trust, and I didn't know who I could depend on because so many people told me, you're just having a conflict with your egos. This is just a personality issue. It's two cats clashing, right? And what had happened to me was, maybe it's minute, maybe it's not a big deal, but when it continued to happen with every person I started to work with, they questioned my ethics and said, well, who did you sleep with last? And they questioned, well, how much money did you steal from safe? You know, how did you get those, how did you get as far as you've gotten in Springfield without sleeping with anybody? And those were pretty harmful, but the day that, anybody know, worked with CELDEF in Johnson County where they tried to get the referendum against fracking passed. Called me and she says, are you okay? And I said, why? She says, well, do you need anything? I said, what do you mean, do I need anything? I need time. I need friends. I need support. I need somebody to care for what I've gone through. And she says, well, I heard you were in the insane asylum. And I was like, what are you talking about? And she said, Georgia said that you were admitted. And I was like, for what? Because you're mentally unstable and suicidal. Well, if you've like lost the fracking battle and thrown you in the bus, like you are gonna be a little depressed, but I'm telling you, I'm not suicidal in that way. So it was just like person after person kept doubting my ability to do things. So it was definitely a character assassination for me. But then, and I've got 7 pages, and every time I have to tell this fucking story, every fucking time I have to tell somebody it's not worth the heartache, and they just look at me and brush me off like I've got some sort of chip on my shoulder. Like, this is 7 fucking pages, and that's as brief as I could get. And it was before screenshotting really was a thing, so sorry I didn't get screenshots, so it sucks. But I was actually one of the original founders of Shawnee Hills and Hollers. Because Illinois South resistance failed because we called Georgia the wedge. And I didn't realize that the actual term was triangulation. She would triangulate in between people and she would pop off the weakest link. She'd pop off the weakest link. She'd see 2 people that were working well together, she would pop herself in between and pop them off. She's a wedge. And so, nickname was the wedge. And so she had wedged herself between and I. She's left the area, but it's like, we can't deal with this crap. She popped herself in between. She tried to, at that point, new to the group, she came in, you've all heard about she has used a tool and an enabler, but that's where she first met at that training. But what she did was she basically divided everybody with 4 truths and a lie. 4 truths and a lie. And that's how she went in there. She divided us all. And that's the best way to destroy progressive organizations. So then she talks me into starting Shawnee Hills and Hollers with her, with Barney's good graces, to call it Shawnee Hills and Hollers. And that's how she also started working on Barney. And you've already heard Barney's story. When we were starting, what had happened was SAFE had organized and lobbied to get the fracking moratorium and the fracking bill so that we could crash it, right? There'd be no fracking in Illinois. I'm sorry, I'm nervous.
You're doing fine.
And I'm scared.
Take your time.
I'm very real scared. I'm scared to trust people. I'm scared because I've been burned for so long, so often, that I can't trust anybody. Then I'm sorry if I'm always posturing. This is what she's like, why are you always posturing? Well, golly, it's a defense mechanism. I have to posture because I don't know how to keep my boundaries strong enough so that she doesn't get to me. That's how much she's fucked with my head. When I'm in the same space with her, my ears fill up with snot. And I feel like I'm talking in a tin can and I can't talk. It's the most fucked up thing for somebody who's been a public speaker. I can't talk anymore. And it pisses me off that she took that from me. Because I'm also a poet. She started showing up where I spoke poetry. For fuck's sake, I couldn't speak my poetry anymore. So, back to the story. And this is, sorry, it's long. We started organizing to do direct action at the hearings, and we came up with these fracking carols. And we sung the fracking carols at all the hearings. It was great. It was actually really great. And at the hearings, we were accumulating names on the sign-in sheets. And we had, each event, we started accumulating more names and more names. And the one in, I think it was Effingham, or maybe it was Decatur, I don't remember which one because they all blur together. I sat in the back because I was fucking exhausted. Fucking exhausted from fighting the Sierra Club and NRDC and ELPC and Faith in Place. And I could feel that heavy cloud coming with Georgia because she'd already destroyed ISR. And she started talking shit about me sitting next to her, because when I get depleted, I do want somebody to support me, and by supporting me, put his arm around me. And I just cried. In the back seat of the van with everybody around us, I just cried. Well, that's all she needed. I was fucking. So when I asked Georgia for the list of all the names that had been accumulated at all the hearings, she told me she's going to put them in the computer. I said, well, where is the, share the link. This Google Sheets is amazing, right? She never shared the link. Well, we haven't put them in yet. Well, I kept asking, where is it, where is it, where is it? And by then, the rumors had started. I had stolen from SAFE. I was mentally unstable. I was a slut shaming me. God, I don't even remember all the other things. So it was, I decided to go run for office at that point and get the fuck out of the area, but still work on doing things for Southern Illinois. And people didn't want to help me. People didn't want to turn out. Maybe it's because I was with the Green Party. But it was really uncomfortable because I didn't know where I fit in. So we started another group called Shawnee Forest Sentinels. And whatever rumors she was spreading with other people just kind of started following me. I couldn't get anybody's ear. I couldn't get any support. I couldn't get people to like trust me or work with me, and I was isolated and I was working by myself, and I'm like, this is fucking bullshit. Then I went to Heartwood, which is a regional organization that fights for the forest, people protecting places they love. And I took the HMS principles there, and we created safer spaces. And Georgia showed up at a meeting, started talking her shit. Started talking her shit in Indiana, and people started questioning me. But then, and if you don't know these names, they all want to support and write, but people are having trouble coming forward and putting testimony on paper or screen. I don't know what it is about that. Georgia had applied for a grant, $400 for the Heartwood mini grant. We had applied for a grant for $400, and they split the grant money up. But Georgia decided to use the grant money to pay for a meeting hall that she says I reserved and failed to pay for it. So she didn't use the grant. She misappropriated grant funds at that event. She ended up using it to pay something off so she could get Touch of Nature off her back. But then there was the fact that she told Heartwood that she was going to be using it to create a publication that was never created. So she, and this is what I wish I could write about and share with us all, because he has saved those emails. She tried to finagle her way out of that when they said, hey, you didn't use the money for what it was for. That wasn't what we agreed upon. Then there was Barney's issue. I should read off of these, but I'm a little, there was a lot of shit that happened at the flyover. But one of the things that really bothers me is that people know that I went through a lot of this shit. I tried to apply for a USDA grant to open up a kitchen that would let people from the Northeast side work on learning how to can and preserve their own food and supply a community kitchen in the area. She decided to ask Georgia to help her with that, and the reason I bring this up is not because it's my story, but because she came up to me afterwards and she says, I just thought it was a personality conflict. I wish I would have listened to you and supported you. Because the same things happened to her. She lost the grant, she lost the building, she put down $5,000 down payment, and they didn't get the grant money because Georgia was triangulating some stuff behind her back. Let's see, and there's the Josh Fox thing. Got her own story to tell there. There was money that was promised, money that wasn't paid, and more lies that were told that, and again, I wish I would have listened to you. I wish I would have heard what you were saying. I wish I would have not thought it was just a personality conflict. I'm just going down the list here. I didn't have anything to do with the Rocky Branch folks, so I'm not going to speak to them. I do know at Heartwood I tried to set up a safer space, and I asked Georgia not to come to a meeting in North Carolina, and when I did that, I was basically victim blamed. Can't tell you how many times I've been victim blamed. Like, I know it can be mean, but it's my defense. It's the only defense I have, and the defense that I feel like the next step would be getting in an altercation, a physical altercation, and I don't think that would serve the higher good of the reasons we're even in this space. Then called me. I've been really, the memorandum of understanding. We created a memorandum of understanding at one point after the fracking debacle to try to bring groups together, and there's a copy of there. This is kind of one of the things that the Accord is going to be based on. What we wanted to do was to create a level playing field and hold each other accountable. And so several of us worked, I'd say probably 6 months on this memorandum of understanding. So basically it's how you come together and create collaborative movements to get a job done. That's the goal that you set, and that one just happens to be the fracking, anti-fracking group. And so what it came down to is like, treat people like you want to be treated. Hold yourself accountable, hold your peers accountable, and in a way that you can. And so what we did is we created this memorandum of understanding, MOU, and with the idea, and I had the idea of, because I was being told, get over it. You're going to have to learn to work with this person because she's still here in this space. And so the memorandum was presented to her on multiple occasions. Actually went to her place to ask for that signing, and it didn't happen. It was like she wouldn't sign a memorandum of understanding, which basically said, if you don't follow this ethical path, then we're going to have to ask you not to participate with us anymore. And that was not something that she was willing to sign. So I learned a long time ago that the best way for me to work with Georgia is not work with Georgia, because it was too traumatizing. And so I decided that this was my boundary. I will work with Georgia if you can tell me how I can hold her accountable. Because unless and until that person can be held accountable, then I don't have a method of protecting myself. So I thought Georgia was a DSA member. She said she paid dues, but we couldn't find it, not national, not local. So she decided to work with Bo, and I wish he would have told his story from his point of view. But I will tell you from my point of view, I got a call from Bo, and he is telling me, Tabitha, you have to work with her. You're just being stubborn. You're just being a spoiled bitch. You are just being obstinate that you won't work with her. And I said, this is my bottom line. You have to find a method to hold her accountable. If she's willing to sign an MOU, then we can talk. He's like, well, I'll be the liaison. Okay, if you want to be that liaison, but I don't want to have anything to do with her at SIDSA because I've already been accused of plenty of things, and I don't want to be involved at all anymore. And even, yeah, no matter what I did, whether my bank accounts were completely transparent to anybody that asked, you know, the men that I was accused of sleeping with publicly stated I wasn't sleeping with them. And so I got a call from when the SIIRP was doing a protest down at the detention center, and they were starting to plan an action. And he said, Tabby, I think I just fucked myself. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, Georgia had the Pulaski Sheriff's Department on the phone listening to our entire planning. And he said, Georgia tried to say it was no big deal. Well, that was so destructive to the trust in the groups that was destructive for me, because after being belittled and be called a spoiled brat and be, like, literally she wedged herself in between the relationship that I had created, which was pretty fucking awesome. We were doing great stuff with hemp and with DSA. She just wedged it right in there with a sledgehammer, and she destroyed the relationship between me and I. We still have trouble trusting each other. I mean, we're still friends, but there's that point at which we feel like we were devastated at the core of our relationship because of what was said on that phone call where I was called a spoiled brat and I was basically not budging. So, what else do I need to tell that's important from an outsider point of view, Melinda?
Whatever you feel in your heart.
Jesus.
Whatever you need to release.
The memory card's full.
The last recounting thing was a disaster.
It was a disaster, and then she came to the SIDSA meeting, and I was just newly appointed as the chairperson, and I'm not saying I'm going to hand over the burden to you to share your burden.
Thank you. Hope you feel lighter.
Not yet.
Not yet. I'll help work on it. All right.
All right.
Your turn.
My turn.
Let me put this down a little bit. The thing is, people look better.
Oh, you want me to? I can stand up.
No, you don't need to stand up. Do whatever's comfortable for you.
We'll do it like this. That's an awkward position. As long as I can lean, I'm good.
All right.
My thing is a balance issue. I can walk. It's just when I'm not paying attention, I'll stumble and, you know.
Okay. Let me position this.
Like walking sticks, I can walk on my own.
I was just wondering if
All right.
outside
balance. All right.
You know.
That is good.
Okay.
It's recording, so.
Okay. As you guys know, my name's Jessica Motzinger, and I had a few run-ins with the toxic organizer. I'm not going to name her. She still, to this day, will call different organizations and tell them not to work with me. Try to say that she repeats lies of behaviors and stuff like that. And just basically she has tried to do character assassination to me. But that just kind of bucks me up and makes me angry because first off, I am a survivor of child abuse and what they refer to as evangelical abuse. I actually have physical scars on my body. I have one above here. I've got a back injury I've had since I was 13. I had to have a state senator actually ship an officer father home because the abuse was so bad. So it wasn't just my father that's abusive. It's all the relatives and everything else. I've been on my own, an independent taxpayer since I was 15. I have not had an easy life. I was one of those kids that I used to get jealous of the foster kids because at least they had some help from the government. It was wrong, but in my youth, you know, when you are in trauma and you are struggling and just surviving, it's easy to feel jealousy or think somehow somebody's getting something. I'm cynical, so I've grown up. I've dealt with this kind of cycle of abuse. I will say personally, I am a people pleaser. It physically hurts when I think somebody needs something and I can't. You know, this is my battle I have to deal with. I call it my daddy issues. I have to deal with it. My mom died when I was 12, so I have all those abandonment. But you know what? All that stuff makes me want to make sure that it doesn't happen again. I want to be the protector, the bulwark, the defender. I don't mind getting smacked around. So when she came after me, I don't think it did too much good. The people that knew me, I've already had tussles with, probably like some of you guys here. When you're a hardcore little activist and you're standing your ground, you're going to piss a few people off. But as long as you have integrity, you treat people with compassion and empathy, and you just don't try to hurt people, you know? It's the golden rule. I don't say I'm a Christian, I say I'm a follower of Jesus. I don't go to church. I don't do that stuff, I don't believe in that. And Georgia is one, sorry, I said its name. G is one that will use the church. And she will use things like a false claim of indigenous or Native heritage to bludgeon others, not to uplift, to bludgeon others.
In origin? That was not meant to be a loaded question.
You can take on my ancestry.
There is a news article that went out. Apparently, white leftist, progressive kind of women have a tendency to claim marginalized type either races or Native. There's a famous professor, I guess, it just came out. She's been knocked. This is apparently a phenomenon that goes on in the world, and they can get called out by indigenous peoples, but no one listens because indigenous peoples are what, 2%? It's kind of like finding a progressive in the military, right? You're just, when you hear it, no one really hears it. Well, the great thing is we're gathering together. As I tell my testimonial, I haven't had 8 years of her. I commend you for not getting violent, because at this point, I would not be, if it was 8 years, I wouldn't be an activist. I would have given up. And I would not be as cool, calm, and professional as I am today. So I want to take this as a building opportunity, and we're all opening ourselves up. I'm just going to read my testimonial, and this is open to anybody who wants to read it. Some names are redacted. They are in office. They do have power around here, but I still think that there should be accountability. No one should be unaccountable, and crap has gone on too long, and I think it's time to change. So the following is the truth to the best of my knowledge. I moved here in late August 2008 because I needed access to better medical care that can be easily accessed in Hawaii. Before then, I only visited Southern Illinois because my husband was born and raised in Belleville. He wanted to retire here where his family is nearby. I was first able to volunteer for the election phone banking in the fall of 2016. I started my life in activism in the spring of 2017. I began attending events and meetings throughout Southern Illinois in the summer fall of 2017, and I was supporting my other indivisible groups like Indivisible Carbondale. I became fast friends with Elizabeth,
Probably me.
but it's redacted in here, Elizabeth, and I would occasionally support her events and rallies around Carbondale. Elizabeth would return the favor when she would attend events up here in the Metro East. Carbondale is where I first started hearing about G. In 2018, I believed it was the real first time I remember meeting Georgia de la Garza. It was the summer of 2018, and I was down in Southern Illinois to attend a Brendan Kelly event where Senator Tammy Duckworth spoke. It was in a VFW hall, and Elizabeth met me there with her daughter and her boyfriend, and at the time, Elizabeth was in a wheelchair, and I required a rollator to walk. So I went into the bar and I bought us all drinks. We were all parched because it was a very hot day, and we went to the table in the front where the ADA side was, so folks can be out of the way and not have to struggle through the narrow paths and non-existent paths around other people. We set down our drinks. The event wouldn't begin until the senator got there. Elizabeth and the group wanted to take this opportunity to get that last cigarette in. So while we were out there, the senator got there and began speaking, so we had to wait until she's completed her speech. Well, then we walked to the table where we had set our drinks. Georgia was sitting there with redacted. Our drinks were not on the table, and they were not on any table near or around the area.
But they were in the back, weren't
they? They were in the very back. I was up by the bar. They were in the extreme back. You know, there was no way we'd be able to get to it with a wheelchair and a rollator because it was a packed house. We were really upset because we were hot, parched, and everything else. And we felt it was deliberate. Well, later on, when Elizabeth wasn't around, Georgia admitted in front of me and a couple other people that she had moved our drinks, laughing, to the very back of the room. Her reasoning was because she couldn't stand Elizabeth and didn't want to sit next to her. Other activist friends were vouching for me, saying that I was a good organizer and a good person, and one that Georgia decided I was worth talking to a couple months after this incident. I believe it was the end of 2018, the beginning of 2019, when a lawyer activist friend started talking to me about investing in a 501c3 and helping them get incorporated, then taking the money I loaned to invest into another nonprofit and continue that good work so that we can get some stuff going on. Well, I met them at the Newman Center for the AIDS Walk. And while we were there, this other person was running around helping with the pancakes and breakfast and stuff like that. And Georgia was having a conversation with me and somebody else. We weren't discussing real business or anything, right? Because it was loud. I have an auditory disorder, so I can't hear you if there's a lot of background noise. I didn't stay for the walk because, again, I was in the rollator. There was no way I was going to be able to do it. And I wasn't sitting with Georgia. That's the thing. I was just sitting down, and then a couple of people came around or whatever to say hi. I have a hard time maneuvering around crowds. If anyone's seen me in crowds with my rollator, I tend to go on the outside because it's frustrating, you know, to go around and inside. So at no point in time was I all merging and talking and everything else. So the AIDS walk was lovely. It was great. Well, I started hanging out with my friend in the summer of 18. He's the one that was talking to me about the 501c3. We hit it off. I enjoyed his quick wit and humor, and he enjoyed politics and activism. At some point, I realized that he was the one who was helping Georgia get the nonprofit paperwork ready for Shawnee Hills and Hollers. I'm not a lawyer. I joined the Navy when I was 17. I don't know legalese or anything else, and I was kind of depending on them. And that's my fault. I went in naive once again, and I handed money. People pleaser, I wanted to do something good. And I trusted a buddy, you know. So sometime after the AIDS walk, Georgia came with my friend, asked me to loan the money for Shawnee Hills and Hollers to become that 501c3. Georgia stated that she had the grant money that she needed to incorporate the 501c3 taken away by the Catholic Church. She said she worked in an activism capacity with the Catholic Church there, and her grant was taken away because she had posted the AIDS walk on her Shawnee Hills and Hollers page. She said that she had depended on that grant to actually get the 501c3 posted, right? So she was a victim because she supported the AIDS walk. Georgia proposed in front of my friend paying me back the loan money either through the grants or membership dues. Since I already talked with my friend about helping get the nonprofits up and started and allowing them to pay me back, I agreed to loan the funds to Shawnee Hills and Hollers to get incorporated. I gave the funds to my friend, and he placed the money into his law office account. Months went by. I only heard about him bitching when he could not meet up with Georgia to sign any paperwork. And he would try, and she wouldn't answer the phone, and he showed me the phone.
How much was it, the money?
$1,800. Yeah, no. Yeah, nothing. We weren't even really working together at all this time, so that's what you guys have to understand. Later on, when you guys started talking to me around the summit time, that's when I started talking to the other indivisible groups down here, and I wanted to have a summit in the Shawnee to introduce different activist group leaders with the political and candidates that work in the southern Illinois area. I had assistance from my fellow group leaders, and we had a fantastic event, so we planned another one. By this point, Georgia was trying to get me to join her at different events in southern Illinois, and I introduced her to my friends in Indivisible Shawnee. So Georgia kept wanting to help with the summit, so I welcomed her in the second one. At the planning meetings, the two people, they're redacted, they're with another group. Georgia came to the meetings with a great deal of excitement, and after a couple of meetings, I noticed that they became quiet and agitated. They complained that Georgia was trying to take over and she was manipulating things. At the time, I was stressed because it was about a week away from the summit, and I was just stressed about having a successful event and securing speakers, and other than complaining from Georgia, and I did not see what they were describing to me, honestly. Georgia would complain to me about things, but I interpreted her behavior as just a little bit of her nature, like she was a grumpy Gus or something. I didn't see the maliciousness yet. Georgia was introducing me to people as part of her Shawnee Hills and Hollers. She supported my group, she said, and she secured a couple of speakers for the summit. In the middle of August, Indivisible held a national gathering in D.C. Since Georgia was helping us find some speakers, I invited her to go. This was a big to-do all of Indivisible met up in DC. It was all paid for. They put us in nice hotels, you know, the whole thing. I couldn't go because my husband was home from Afghanistan at the time, and we went on our very first family vacation. So I had a couple open places. I invited her to go. I came back 11 days later, and the entire thing was chaos, and Sheila remembers all this. It was just nuts. The two people that I was working with, they came back. They were so angry. One of them wasn't speaking to me. The other one was furious, saying that Georgia had just taken over everything and that they just have to step back because they were not interested in fighting. So at that point, I didn't tell Georgia to go away. I selfishly just wanted the summit to go well. And since the two people were stepping back, their husbands stepped back too. And they were our free music for the summit during that time. And I argued with my Indivisible Illinois co-leader about not kicking out Georgia, but he made it clear that she was not welcome in Indivisible. She had insulted and angered a few of our Indivisibles during the DC gathering. I got firsthand accounts from 4 different group leaders that her behavior and language towards others in that weekend in DC was atrocious. I was informed that Georgia was not welcome to work with Indivisible Illinois because of the strife that she caused in such a short amount of time between our group leaders and her actions. I was wrong not to believe my fellow Indivisible friends. I apologized about a month and a half later. I did get a concussion a couple days after that summit, so I was out of it a little bit, so that's why it was a month and a half later. I admitted that I was wrong, and I apologized for my role in any hurt that I had caused as leaders and friends. The weeks before and after September 19 were busy times in the political scene. There was trainings, there was banquets, there was all sorts of events, and so many different dinners and meetings, one couldn't make all of them. There was a training that we went to in Southern Illinois, hosted by DPI, the day before the summit. We attended the training, and there was a bunch of people there. I was not a volunteer for the redacted politician yet, but I was friendly with him and friends with one of the activist friends that was helping him. So we all sat next to each other at the training. Georgia came in late and took a seat at the end of the row where we were. And while we were seating, a ballot access petition was going around the room for the other congressional candidate, Lindsay. He was trying to get put on the ballot, so it was rolling around. Georgia grumbled to me and others nearby that we weren't supposed to be passing around petitions at this training. So she motioned like she would put the petitions in her bag, and all of us said, no, don't do that next to us, right? And so she put the board of the petitions back on the table, and she became upset and stated we were acting like babies. It was just a joke. Can't we take a joke? And the training room was crowded. Everyone was milling and driving around together and visiting and networking. And I went looking for my friend, Sheila, at the time, and we were driving together. Well, she was outside sitting with a homeless gentleman sharing a lunch that she'd brought from home. So I went back inside immediately. The candidate whose petitions were going around asked me if I took them. And I said, no, I would never take anyone's petitions. And he asked me if I knew whom I have them, and I said no, because I watched Georgia make a show of putting them back on the table. About an hour or so later, we were in the grocery store when Georgia told us that indeed she had taken the petitions. She said that it was a lesson because he shouldn't have been passing them around like that anyway. And everyone was told not to bring their petitions. We were angry and upset. And someone called at that moment and asked if I had any knowledge about the missing petitions were. And I said I'd get back to her after I asked around. So the group of us had to badger Georgia in an Aldi store to admit to this politician that indeed she had the missing petitions. So she finally called this politician, claimed it was a big misunderstanding, that she had so much paperwork that she didn't see the petitions under everything and accidentally scooped them up. So the morning after the second summit, we were having breakfast at an Airbnb that I rented for myself and others. And this politician asked me to meet her for breakfast next day and the day after. I was excited with the chance to get to work with this politician and DPI. You know, well, Georgia told me that she was asked too. So we all met up at the restaurant, and this politician told me how great she thought the summit had gone, and that she wanted me to help organize her first fundraiser. So Southern Illinois has traditionally been ignored, and there was a chance to bring people and raise funds for Southern Illinois. I was excited knowing I'd be helping with the planning with the November 2nd event. I ended up driving back home to get some rest and catch up around my house. After the second summit, which was then the middle of September the 19th, I started helping with a political campaign. It's redacted in here. I helped him canvass, and I got some ballot access petitions signed September 14th when I went to an overnight festival in Benton with my father-in-law and a couple of friends with the band who was playing. I passed out and had a severe concussion. Georgia came up a few days after my concussion and said she was working with Joel's campaign. And he approached her about being a possible advisor or a manager. And so it quickly became apparent, just like everyone said, Georgia starts having personality issues. Meetings start going on hours at a time. People are intimidating her, getting sexually harassing her. Joel ended up, and I did not realize this at the time, but he ended up putting in a cease and desist. Well, at the time, with the money situation, he was also upset because she claimed that she had a caterer's license and she wouldn't allow us to hire a food truck or a caterer, and she said she would do all of it. And so I was basically paying for the food. Joel was reimbursing me, and she spent about $1,000 of his money on brats, corn, you know, stuff with flies all over. It was not a successful event. People were pissed and angry, and that was the first time she misused kind of funds that he let her do. He told her to leave after that. When she left, I had purchased some tickets to some events, and she proceeded the email campaign with United Congregations of the Metro East, and some donations wanted me to write letters to have it taken back, and Joel to get kicked out of certain events or get the money taken back. It became a nonstop, vengeful thing. So the month of October, I'm trying to work with her with this politicians event, and I don't feel like I should even talk about this one part because he's not here. But essentially, she threatened this person and said that because he had not followed through with the paperwork for the 501c3, even though she hadn't signed paperwork that she was required to, that she would call the bar and have him disbarred, and that would ruin his business and everything else. So with my concussion, I walk in and ask for the money and hand it to her saying, do you promise you'll just drop it? You're just going to drop it and walk away, and you're just going to pay me back with the loans. Original agreement, you're just cutting this person out. You got a lawyer, right? She said she had a lawyer. She would continue it. She lied. That money's gone. It's not a 501c3. It has been involuntarily dissolved. It's not. The money's gone. I lost that. With this last fundraiser, I was pretty much stuck. You know, I could not get out of this. This was November 2nd, and I was basically told that if I fucked it up, I would never even be able to ever work with DPI again. This is all Georgia talking. It's all threats with this one politician, and I wasn't thinking straight. Technically, I shouldn't have been running around. I had a post-concussion. I don't know if you guys saw me, but for like over a month, it was bad. So, in my concussed state, I followed along, played along. If my brain was better, I would not have. So I have to own my own responsibility in this. But basically, vendors, everything I was supposed to get reimbursed for. Vendors for the desserts, vendors for the music. King Juba, I paid $500 and she refused to give a receipt so that the money could come back. I lost money because redacted politician.
I'll put that out in the edit.
Yeah, well, that's just for all of us too. Redacted politician knew all this, all the emails, knew that I was in the hole and that she wasn't able to get receipts, so she called me and started asking for receipts. And that's when I had to go after King Juba and ask and let them know, no, we never had this. She's a bad faith actor. You know, this was awful. In the middle of all this going on, she's calling people and telling people that I am doing drugs in front of my children, that I am she called DCFS on me and said that I was making my daughters watch sexually explicit videos and doing shrooms in front of my daughters, and that I was doing drugs and I had a child taken away by DCFS prior, and that there might have been another child in the house that no one knew about. I mean, just, this was a really list of crazy stuff. And, you know, we had to go through all this. I know it's her. The lady even asked, who did you piss off? Well, I know it's her because about 4 days ago, she called up with another organizer and tried lumping Joel, this other person, and myself all together, and said what an enabler and a bad person I was and everything else. But you know what? That person let me know. Georgia has limits. She's not all powerful. People are afraid of abusers because they don't want to stir the pot because it's going to stink. Until you clean it out, it's going to stink. So let's clean it out, let's get it done, and go on to Springfield, because unfortunately her reach and toxicity has gone up north too. But I'm happy to see, and I want to see, because there was people here that I wouldn't have worked with before. And it was because of Georgia and suspicion. And you know what? I'm going to work with those activists now. So that's a huge connection we just made. It's as simple as that. She has no power as long as we get it out in the open. Abusers thrive in silence. So don't be quiet. Yeah.
Now,
all right.
unburden yourself with the next.
I've had it, Haas.
Okay.
It feels pretty good.
Okay. Oh, my story is not quite so long.
Sorry.
No, I can do mine faster. Okay. My name is Pam Gronemeyer, and I told you I'm a physician, and I was actually in the very beginning of the Illinois Single Payer Coalition, which we put together, and ever since we put it together, I've been the VP of the board, and I'm really the most southern of every member. I mean, and I'm trying to get everybody involved, but it's just hard. Okay, so I met Georgia at Jessica's Shawnee Indivisible meeting, and I gave a talk on single payer. And after I was there, Georgia came up and introduced herself to me, and she was interested in single payer, and she knew the coal miners union people, and we could get together. And okay, so since we don't have anybody farther south than myself, and I live in the Metro East, I called her to talk to her about maybe she'd like to be on the board. You know, we had a new board, but you have to be a member. And okay, so I thought she was really interested. Well, she never really get involved. She may have like published things about our meetings, but she never came to them. Okay, so then in 2018, okay, I'm in the Congressional District 13, and I was an early member of our revolution, because I mean I actually was one of the people that was voted on the board. So, but I really was not a total participant, but you know, I would call on the Wednesday calls. Well, in my congressional district, we have Rodney Davis, who's used to work for John Shimkus and is a, you know, tried and true Republican, I guess, who just wrote something about how he owes his election to, or his victory speech, he said he owed his election to Trump. And, you know, I've been to see Rodney, and, you know, he thinks Medicare for all is socialism, and he thinks everyone hates the VA, even though the VA people who go to the VA like it, and it's underfunded. Okay. So I know I'm never going to get anywhere with Rod. So we had a candidate, Betsy Dirksen Londrigan, who was favored, talked about health care. I mean, she was probably found by Durbin, and she was probably influenced by the ACA. But I had her ear, and I kept talking to her about Medicare for all. And I think, you know, if it came to a vote, she would vote for it. Okay, so I tried to get our revolution to endorse Betsy. And the meeting I was on, they did. And Clem was on it, Clem Balanoff was on it from Chicago, and I know Clem pretty well. Okay, the next week, she got Betsy taken off, because she and someone up from Joliet, and they all decided that Betsy they went to her 2018 website, and this was for the 2020 election that we're talking, and in 2018, supposedly she endorsed ICE. And she did not ever say that she thought ICE did everything right, but it wasn't even on the 2020 website. So Georgia called me to say that's why she had wanted to take her down, and that, you know, she had the 2 immigrant adopted children, and she really was worried about immigrants. And then it was the same day that the woman came out as the whistleblower. There was a nurse who worked for for ICE, or who worked up in, and who came out and said there was a doctor who was sterilizing women. Okay, well, I'm a doctor, and let me tell you, I know doctors, not just to sterilize people, they make money. And you know, and this guy that they were accusing, the nurse, the whistleblower was accusing of sterilizing immigrants, had also been indicted for Medicare fraud before. So I'm sure he was doing it for money. But okay, so that it sort of came out that Georgia thought I was anti-immigrant, which is like, you know, my grandparents were immigrants. What am I going to be anti-immigrant? Okay, so then about 2 weeks later, or 3 weeks later, since I'm on the board of the ISPC, I got an email from somebody on the ISPC that they wanted to talk to me about my conversation with Georgia. Well, first of all, ISPC is not part of our revolution. And realistically, why would Georgia have called them about our conversation? I mean, it was not anything to do with single payer. It was about a candidate. Okay, so I sort of got called on the carpet for that. And then, which has progressed since then, and which I really attribute partly to Georgia's bad influence, is the fact that they kicked me off the board of the Illinois Single Payer Coalition because they said, like, I'm like anti-immigrant and I'm not politically correct. And I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, all this stuff that, I spent a lot of time and money on them. I got Wendell Potter to be on their calls. I got a call with Friedman, who does the economist who does Medicare for all Medicare for all financing ideas, and then I also set up the town hall with Public Citizen. So it's not, you know, there's no way. And I mean, now basically the Illinois Single Payer Coalition, they don't talk to me, and I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but I just have to feel that it has to do related to Georgia's beginning the bad influence. And I did have a phone call on there when this all started coming up, where Georgia was apologizing to me because of all the cray-cray that was going on down here, and that she didn't know how I got involved, why I ever got pulled into it. Well, she pulled me into it because there's just no way. And I mean, I'm still, I have been a Bernie delegate twice. I've run for the State Central Committee twice. I've been around, I'm a physician. I've been a physician for how many years? I've been in many medical staffs. I've been the president of many medical staffs. I don't have really any prejudices that, everybody has some, but I realistically try to conquer any prejudice I have. So, I mean, fortunately I didn't get involved with her in money anything, but, the last thing I'll say, I went on the last Our Revolution phone call. They have a call every Wednesday for leadership. And about a month ago, they had talked about, they were really big on getting Medicare, I think it was right after Jayapal's bill came out, about getting action on Medicare for all. And Our Revolution was supposed to be sending myself, Adam Broad, and Bob Babcock a letter with the names of people that we could contact in Our Revolution to try to get them interested in Medicare for all again. And we never got the letter. So I was actually on the phone call just to follow up. I was going to say something, but before that, Georgia said that there were 2 people on the phone call that she couldn't speak in front of. And I'm sure one was Bob, because she said some bad things about Bob, and I'm sure the other one was myself, so I just got off the phone. I mean, I don't really want to interact with her, but I also don't think she should destroy people's reputations. And I mean, I think I've worked long enough and hard enough that I should be, I don't really think I'm ethically challenged, and then I'm a good person, and I put my money in where my mouth is. For my employees, I give my employees, I've always gotten full health insurance with me paying the premiums, and I get as low a deductible as I can for them. So they have $1,000 now. If they go over $500, I give them the $500 back. So I mean, I really do believe Medicare is a human right, and I mean, it's so stupid for the Illinois Single Payer Coalition to cut somebody else. Since, like I said, the farthest south they have a person now that I know who participates is in Mattoon, and that's not really totally far south. So that's all I have to say.
Time to unburden yourself to the next.
That actually connects to some stuff that I had gone through that I didn't talk about.
Okay.
That I think would be appropriate. So,
Kind of hand Alan the testimony, or part of the testimony.
What?
What portion you were handed over?
Oh,
We're just passing, unburdening ourselves.
Here, there we go.
It's symbolic, I guess.
Yeah,
So,
it just.
I was privy to the situation that Pam had talked about. We were both delegates for the Bernie Sanders campaign in 2020 in the same congressional district. I was also a campaign manager, which basically just meant that I did all the field operations for the Stephanie Smith campaign, which by most traditional measures was not actually successful, but from the No Ameren Shutoffs campaign, it actually forged a lot of alliances that was foundational to keeping people safe during the pandemic. We collected petitions throughout that whole thing for lift the ban on rent control, ban fracking, Medicare for all, and we even turned in 1,300 petitions to 1,300 petition signatures for no war with Iran in February to the city of Urbana. But with what Pam had experienced, one of the things that's really important to know is, like, I was actually the source of the information that Georgia was bringing forward. So I know how it was misrepresented, and I also know how she went and used this in a way that was excessive. So the 2018 website did have a statement positive to border control. They might have said ICE explicitly. Her 2020 Chicago Tribune survey response is where that continuation happened. Nowhere else. Like, that's really it. And where I was coming from at that time, because I had no idea about the background dynamics, right? I knew Rodney Davis was terrible. I also thought that our revolution was a progressive organization and that there was plenty of support and that a progressive organization should have a line. So that was where I was coming from in that experience, and I'm very sorry that Georgia then went and used that to attack you everywhere there. It's not necessarily that we need to agree on every single thing. We have so many other things to fight on. The things that I was told after what had happened, because Pam's organization had joined No Ameren Shutoffs. Southern Illinois People for Progress is a member organization. We had a group chat where we put the liaisons from each organization in, that we still organize in to this day. Georgia calls me and says that Pam has been bullying her. And so the action that I took, which Pam rightfully pointed out was wrong, was I removed her from the group chat because I thought that I was supporting a victim, and this is before I had adopted the best practice of, when you don't know, find a mutual and get them to approach. That's where that lesson comes from. And so for months, Georgia had been leaking information about No Ameren Shutoffs, creating rumors, having me on the phone for hours where she would strategize how to outmaneuver Richard Rodriguez, where she would strategize how to deal with Susan Ibarra, right? And all it really was obstruction of the organizing efforts that we were doing. And the smash and dash that they tried to do in an unstructured space, which is usually very successful, was that after she had basically caused my state representative and a former boss of mine in the local township to spread a QAnon conspiracy theory about me in this community. These are progressive icons. We had to have an answer for that because it wasn't just me. There were candidates for municipal office that were trying to do well by their communities that were getting traumatized by this. So we went to an independent media outlet, we got that reported. Georgia then uses that to say Alan is blasting these folks and we need to withdraw. And she gets the Our Revolution folks to say, utilities, like, show us proof that this actually affected anybody, even though we already had. They made accusations that I was not okay with women leading. All capital letters, just trying to traumatize folks. And we had folks who were traumatized that needed to leave the chat group for weeks before they were safe enough to return. And that sort of thing is something that if they targeted somebody with trauma, that probably would have been the end. We wouldn't have passed 7 resolutions in 2021. We wouldn't have gotten the utility disconnection avoidance program, which is shown to decrease the coronavirus caseloads to the lowest since last March, right? So it just goes to show that when she finds the right target, when she finds the levers that she thinks that she can weaponize, she does. And with regard to the progressive electeds in my community, they very well might have been triangulated. The best understanding that I have right now, because I still do not fully understand, is that they think that I am trying to, like, destroy them when I don't want anyone further to the right to replace them. And things like me requesting that they adopt a community agreement like I'd sent to the Champaign County Democratic Party in January resulted in me being called a QAnon leftist. So it created this really unsafe dynamic that also threatens one of the few Democratic majority counties in downstate, right? And this cost people elections. One of the things that people don't know is all of the municipal campaigns that were supported by our revolution downstate, that were promised resources, that were dragged into the dynamics related to the abuse, like the Jacksonville incumbent, progressive incumbent, who lost by